All right, we'll start with this question since it's quite relevant. Question is, dear Rabbi, can you please tell us what we can do to help our brothers and sisters in Israel right now? So, as we all know, our brothers and sisters in Israel are facing vicious attacks. Hundreds, if not thousands, of rockets by now have been launched on innocent citizens in the state of Israel by the Hamas terrorist organization and others, jihad Islamists, evil people who seek our destruction and seek to destroy and murder as many innocent people as possible. And let there be no doubt about this. There is no moral equivalence, as some are trying to say. On the one hand, the juxtaposition to me is very, very clear. On the one hand, you see these terrorists who are simply trying to annihilate us, to destroy us, to murder us, and murder innocent people, Jews, not just, by the way, in the state of Israel, but Jews everywhere. And on the other side, you see the state of Israel simply trying to defend itself against these evil people. They're not trying to target any innocent citizens, God forbid, quite the opposite. If they have to bomb Hamas terrorists within the innocent people where they hide, because they use innocent people as shelter or as covers, they actually send text messages and droplets to tell them to get out of there before they attack. So IDF, I think, is simply trying to defend itself and to try and minimize its casualties as much as it can, while the terrorists are trying to do the exact opposite, to kill as many innocent people as possible and to maximize the amount of casualties. So there's no moral equivalence, and that I know is clear to everyone here. But to answer the question, what can be done these days to help our brothers and sisters in Israel right now as they fight this terrible war? I think there are multiple avenues. Number one, the avenue of public influence, or influencing public opinion. And what I mean by that is that everyone has their own social network that sometimes need to be educated about the facts and the truth. And by communicating that, I think we're shining the light of truth in the world, each in our own way. We can also team up with tremendous organizations like AIPAC, for example, to educate not just our social networks, but also political representatives in Washington, D.C. and in other places. I think that's tremendously important. Another avenue is to simply help the people of Israel with acts of charity and kindness. There are organizations that fundraise for victims of terror, for Israelis who are suffering right now because they can't even work. They have to spend their days and nights in bomb shelters. And there are organizations who help those who need the most help, like children who are suffering from trauma or simply the injured, who are injured by these terrible attacks. So I would encourage people to reach out to those organizations and try to help them as much as possible. That's number two. Number three, I think that, as it always is, there's a spiritual war going on here, not just a physical one. And the spiritual war is basically a war between good and evil, between light and darkness. And in order to prevail, for light to prevail, for goodness to win, then we need to also do our part to contribute to the goodness of the world, to the light in this world. How so? By doing mitzvahs, more and more mitzvahs. At the end of the day, the more light there is in the world, the less darkness there is in the world. Mitzvahs create light, create goodness. And on a spiritual level, there's tremendous evil, tremendous darkness, but we have the ability spiritually to remove this darkness by simply increasing our acts of light. So that's yet another avenue. And I think maybe it's an avenue that's most approachable. Maybe we can't ourselves become soldiers in the IDF and fight that fight, but at least we can help them by doing these mitzvahs too, besides the avenues mentioned also. So I think these are three very important avenues that we ought to explore. And of course, everyone can think of other ways. I'm sure, I know of pen pal initiatives, for example, of simply creating somewhat of a bridge between us and the people of Israel. That's also another beautiful initiative. If you have families and friends in Israel, I will encourage you to call them, to send them, and share with them your words of encouragement and of support. I know they appreciate it. And everyone can do whatever they think they can do in order to show that support and to, in a way, fight the good fight. But these are some ideas to answer this question right here. All right, next question. And this is also quite relevant for a different reason, but this is the question. Dear Rabbi, can you please share with us what is the festival of Shavuot coming up all about? So what is the festival of Shavuot about? Festival of Shavuot indeed is coming up Sunday night, and it lasts 2 days outside of Israel, Monday and Tuesday. The festival of Shavuot basically is the festival in which we received the Torah on Mount Sinai. Interestingly, this year it will be 3,333 years ago. Now, on a deeper level, the festival of Shavuot is really the renewal of vows between a couple that has been in love for 3,333 years. And that's God and the Jewish people. The Jewish people are considered to be the bride in Kabbalistic thought, and God is considered to be the groom. On Mount Sinai, God gave us his marriage contract, and that was the Torah. And there we married. And each and every year on Shavuot, we renew our vows. We renew our commitment. We say to God, look, we may have not followed your Torah this past year to the T, but we are renewing our commitment to you this Shavuot, and we commit ourselves anew to this marriage contract and to you and to our love. That's on a deeper level what happens on Shavuot. And on an even deeper level, what the Kabbalists also explain is that during the giving of the Torah, God basically bridged heaven and earth. Before the giving of the Torah, heaven was heaven and earth was earth, and they weren't connected. But when God gave us the Torah, he enabled heaven to come down on earth, and in a way to permeate, heaven to permeate its light into earth. That's why when the Torah was given, for example, the voice of God, as it says, Lo Yasaf, had no echo. Because the voice of God permeated the rocks, the earth itself. And in a way, during the giving of the Torah, we then received also our general mission. Now that there's a piece of heaven in earth, it is our duty to somehow reveal it and to go out to the world, engage with this world, and transform it into a heavenly place, into a spiritual place. How do we do so? By increasing mitzvot, of course, but by using this world for heavenly matters, for good purposes. So when I take an apple, for example, and I say a blessing over it, I've revealed the godliness within the apple, and it becomes holy. Or when I use this table right now to study Torah with you, then I have revealed the godliness within the table, and the table that is holy. And the big idea is that Mashiach will come when this world now will have been completely and fully elevated. So with everything that we do in this world to elevate it, we are really preparing the stage for the coming of Mashiach. And that's really the deepest point about Shavuot. On Shavuot, God empowered us with this ability to really transform this world into a heavenly place. And it has become a duty to do so ever since the giving of the Torah 3,333 years ago. But practically speaking, on Shavuot, the mitzvah really is to come to synagogue on Monday morning, and at CBT, the Torah reading will take place at about 10:30 a.m. on Monday morning, and to listen to the Ten Commandments. Because as we listen to the Ten Commandments, we are re-experiencing, reliving what happened on Mount Sinai 3,333 years ago. So that's really the mitzvah of Shavuot. I encourage you to come and listen to the Ten Commandments and accept the Torah anew and renew our vows as mentioned. In addition to that, there are some customs of Shavuot. One custom is to stay up all night, and we'll have a learn-a-thon. And Rabbi Eisen will be speaking with us and some other speakers at 11 p.m. on Sunday night, as we do each and every year, with the exception of last year because of COVID. And we'll study Torah in anticipation of, again, the giving of the Torah the next morning. and in order to be best refined and ready for that receiving of the Torah the next morning. That's another custom. Another custom of Shavuot is to eat dairy. We eat dairy because when God gave us the Torah, he also told us that we should separate meat and milk. We went back home and we understood that there's no way we can cook a meat dish because everything was mixed. And God just told us to separate meat and milk and to wait 6 hours between meat and milk. All we could eat, all that was readily available was dairy. So we ate dairy on that day. So to commemorate that, we eat dairy. There are other reasons. Kabbalistically, dairy shares the color white, and it's to, white milk, for example, white cheese, and that's to share with us that the Torah also is white. White is the color of purity, and the Torah brings purity to the world. Another idea is that the word for dairy in Hebrew or for milk is chalav, which has a numerical value of the number 40. And that's to remind us the 40 days and the 40 nights that Moses stayed on Mount Sinai to receive the Torah. That's yet another custom. One more custom of Shavuot is to decorate our synagogues and our homes with as many flowers and plants as we can. Why? Because the Midrash tells us that when God chose to give the Torah on Mount Sinai was a barren mountain. Yet the power of it receiving the Torah created a miracle. And the mountain, Mount Sinai, that was once barren, all of a sudden began to flourish. Plants and flowers everywhere. Why? On a deeper level, to teach us that Eitz Chaim hi lamachazikim ba, as the verse says, that the Torah is a tree of life. The Torah brings life to even the most barren place. Eitz Chaim hi lamachazikim ba, it's a tree of life. It's a tree of life that continues to grow, continues to make the world flourish. So to remind us of that again, we fill our homes with all sorts of plants and flowers and anything that is green and enables us really to remind ourselves of that beautiful Mount Sinai that flourished during the giving of the...
Yes. I have two questions. One is it customary to wear white when you go to Shavuot?
Right. So so speaking of white and the color of dairy, there is a custom, Kabbalistic custom, to wear white on Shavuot, again representing the idea that the Torah is pure. God gave us the ability also to make this world pure with the Torah, and therefore they were the color of purity, which is white.
I have another question. So the 10 commandments were given at Mount Sinai, okay? Now, how do the 613 mitzvot, how do they relate to the 10 commandments?
Well, the 10 commandments were given as the kickoff, so to speak, of the giving of the Torah Mount Sinai. Then, as mentioned, Moses stayed for 40 days and 40 nights to receive the rest of the Torah. Within the rest of the Torah, you have all of the 613 commandments. So
it was given about the same time.
Yeah, 40 days, during the 40 days that followed. But the first day was the 10 commandments. That's what we received.
I see. So it's really like a package deal?
Yeah. I mean, and then for 40 days and 40 nights.
Jordan think I'm funny. Jordan, I'm Jewish, so I have to think.
That's it. All right.
Okay, thank you.
No, sure. But that's the big idea. All right. So that was the question about Shavuot. We spoke about Israel, we spoke about Shavuot. And then I have one more question for tonight, and then I'm happy to open this up to any further questions. But dear Rabbi Allouche, if you are with a number of people having a discussion and someone tells a lie, or the facts that they mention are wrong, should you correct them? How should you respond? So that's a good question. Because you have to think ahead. You have to almost play chess when you speak and when you interact with people. So if your relationship with that people is a relationship in which they are receptive to you correcting them, and then absolutely you should correct them. Some people are not at all receptive. And some people, when you try to correct them, they'll just further the lie even more. So maybe sometimes it's wiser to stay quiet. We've mentioned that line of Maimonides that says that Kashem mitzvah lomar davar shenishma, kach mitzvah shelo lomar davar shelo nishma, which means that just as it is a mitzvah to say something that is heard, so too is it a mitzvah not to say something that is not heard. In other words, don't say anything that won't be accepted, that when the person is not receptive to your words. So we have to think of that during those types of interactions. I will say this, that I would make a clear difference between a white lie or a lie that can somehow be washed in the lies of society. You know, if someone tells me, speaking about a white lie, if someone tells me, oh, it's a beautiful day today and it's really rainy, I'm not going to fight with them. I mean, whatever, fine. That's their perspective. My perspective is not going to change anything in reality. But if it's a lie that can cause harm, then even if a person is not receptive, I think it is the person's duty to correct that lie. If that lie, for example, is about, speaking about the war of Israel, someone says, look at these Jews, they are evil and they are attacking innocent citizens in Gaza, which is a blatant lie, so often communicated by anti-Semites from Ilan Omar, who tweeted a disgusting, appalling tweet today to anti-Semites that we find in the streets, then it is the duty to light that candle of truth in the world. Why? Because those lies cause harm to Jews, cause harm to anyone who cares for truth, and cause harm eventually to humanity. So if you have lies that cause harm, then it is the person's duty to correct those lies. Now, of course, one has to be careful on how that truth is communicated. And of course, loving your fellow is still a mitzvah. And v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha needs to be exercised no matter what, even when we have to correct those lies. And in the words of the Tanya, and it's hard to implement, but the Tanya in chapter 32, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi brilliantly says that we have to recognize the evil in people as much as we have to recognize the good in people. And we have to hate the evil, yet love the good. And sometimes it's hard because the evil is so is boiling us up that we forget to look at the good. But yes, we have to hate the evil. And I say hate, it's a strong word, but I didn't make it up. King David made it up. Ohavei Hashem sinu ra. The ones who love God should hate bad. And he purposely said to hate so that there is no moral equivalence between good and bad. Bad is bad, and that has to be called by name. And good is good. And if I start washing and wish-washing bad, then I lose really any type of moral lenses on this world. And eventually I won't even know how to fight bad because it loses its badness, loses its real name. The only way I can fight bad is if I can identify it as bad. So I have to identify bad and hate it passionately. But on the other hand, also I have to love good. And there is good in every human being too. So me correcting people doesn't mean that I love them less. Maybe the opposite. I should love them more. And that love hopefully can also heal them. But again, going back to the question, that when we hear lies that can cause harm, then silence has no play. Then we have to light the candle of truth. I'll conclude by evoking the words of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, who conveyed these words to Bibi Netanyahu, who's the Prime Minister of Israel right now. And somehow he has more lives than a cat. But it looks like he's going to be the Prime Minister for quite a while still, especially after what happened today. We won't get into politics, but when he became the ambassador of Israel to the United Nations, he came to seek the advice of the late Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Schneerson of blessed memory. And the Rebbe told him that he is there, his task in the United Nations is to light the candle of truth in this house of lies. And he shouldn't be intimidated because small light can expel a lot of darkness. You just have to light the candle of truth. And I believe that that's what we ought to do when we face lies that can harm.